Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today and to repeat what John Mackey just said. But in any case, I hope I can discuss some of the little more scientific details on the concepts that we don't have to have heart attacks, nobody has to have a stroke, you don't have to get demented when you get older, and we can win the war on breast cancer, we can do it right now, and every person in this room should take charge of their health destiny and make a decision not to have happen to you what happens to other Americans. Because nutritional science has advanced to the point where we don't have to have these things happen anymore. So let's use ourselves as an example. For example, if a plane's in trouble, they always say put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then help others, right? So we have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. We have to get every one of you has to be an example of excellent health. Have a long, happy, healthy, pleasurable life. Live between 95 and 105 years old without heart attacks, with your full mental and physical capacity intact. Because America has the worst healthy life expectancy score of all modern industrialized countries. Out of all 27 countries, we're the worst. And the word healthy life expectancy means not just how long you live, but the quality of your life in your last 10 or 15 years of life. Whether you're in pain, whether you're suffering, whether you can see and hear, whether you're housebound, mobile, whether you're suffering with surgeries, whether you're medicating yourself to the point of feeling drugged out and fatigued. And the healthy life expectancy score that's been followed by the World Health Organization has shown that the greater access of a population to medical care and the more money spent on medical care correlates with a worsening of the healthy life expectancy score, even within this country. That medical care is partially and largely responsible for our. So we spend more than 3 times as much on medical care, and we have the worst healthy life expectancy score to show for it. Because medical care is mostly like a permission slip, to an extent like the vitamin pills are, that give people the subconscious permission that they think it's okay to not be as careful with their diet. And if we have time, we'll discuss some of the negative effects of those things, like the relationship of folic acid pills and cancer, or vitamin A and hip fractures and early death, and beta-carotene and high rates of cancer, and vitamin E and high rates of heart attack and cancer. We're talking here that you can't escape from the biological needs of the human body, and those needs are such that natural plant foods have not just 30 nutrients in it, they have hundreds, even thousands of nutrients that are integrally important to our immune system and our ability to live a long, happy life. And if I analyze the diets of most people living here, most people coming to these conferences, we'd find the vast majority of people not achieving micronutrient adequacy in their diet. So let's start here and review some of these basic concepts, because obviously plant-based foods are the secret to us achieving excellent health and a happy and healthy life. All right, so food gives us, so with that as an introduction, let's get started on some of these basic concepts, okay? I'm going to talk rapidly, so if you can't follow this, too bad. All right, food gives us macro and micronutrients. The word macro means big and micro means small. And the micronutrients are those nutrients that do not contain calories. Those are vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. The macronutrients are the ones that are big, like fat, carbohydrate, and protein that contain calories. And water is also a macronutrient as well. We're not talking about that much right now. But the American diet gives us excess amount of macronutrients. We're consuming too many calories in the frame, and we're also micronutrient deficient. So micronutrients don't contain calories. When scientists discovered the 14 vitamins and 16 minerals back in the 1930s, people thought this was fantastic. We'd live longer, we'd have less cancer, we'd have less autoimmune diseases, and of course it seemed to spark an epidemic where cancer rates exploded. Autoimmune diseases started to skyrocket parallel to the increased risk of cancer, and obesity and heart disease also took off at unprecedented levels of increase. Back in the year 1900, only 4% of Americans had heart attacks and strokes, and now it's 40%. The diseases we see today didn't occur in primitive countries in earlier times in human history. For example, there are pockets of the world, and much of Much of rural China actually has less than 1% of the population getting breast cancer, and in this country today we have 18%. Is it going to take rocket science to figure out how we can get a population with less than 1% getting breast cancer if major pockets of humanity all through human history never had breast cancer? We're not going to, we're putting billions of dollars. This is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, as if people aren't aware of it. And what are we going to find? We're going to put billions of dollars into breast cancer research that's going to be funneled to drug companies looking for a magic pill that's going to wipe out breast cancer? What kind of nonsense is this? Life isn't a fairy tale. This is reality. So what I'm saying here, what I'm actually saying is that every piece of broccoli has 1,000 different nutrients in it. A strawberry has 700 different nutrients. They're not just there, they're not optional, they're necessary. If you're not going to achieve micronutrient adequacy, you're laying yourself exposed to serious illnesses. So obviously, John stole this slide from me. But here's the point. Because I'm saying that with Americans eating mostly animal products and processed foods, I'm saying a piece of chicken is the same as a bagel. Why am I saying the piece of chicken is the same as a bagel? What's that? They're both sources of macronutrients, right? But neither one contains a sufficient or a micronutrient load. In other words, right, vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals, the major micronutrient load that's in food is phytochemicals. Vitamins and minerals are a smaller portion of that total micronutrient load, right? When you take processed and refined foods, they lose the vitamins and minerals that were in there to begin with. Processed grains like bagels and white rice are linked to breast cancer and heart disease and strokes. They're dangerous foods. They're breast cancer-causing foods. You see, there's no vitamin E, vitamin C, vitamin K, folate, bioflavonoids, lignins, right? Isothiocyanates, glucosinolates, and in other words, there's no phenols. None of the anti-cancer phytochemicals and protective factors are in processed and refined carbohydrate foods or oils. They're not in processed foods. They're not in animal products either. Where do you get them from? The answer to the question, the bagel is like the piece of chicken because neither one contains any antioxidants or phytochemicals. The substances in food that arms the immune system with the ability to protect against infection, against cancer. If we're eating these foods, we're deficient. So the American diet is radically and dangerously deficient in plant food substances. Of course, animal products are particularly, we'll talk about the link of animal products to breast cancer, but keep in mind that sugar and white rice and white flour are also powerfully linked to breast cancer. And we should be advocates as to try to avoid and minimize those cancer-promoting foods in our diets as well. But of course, there's a powerful link between cancer and plant foods and cancer and heart disease and plant foods and longevity. And if we plot the amount of unrefined plant foods consumed by almost any population, as that percent of calories from unrefined plant foods goes up, and don't forget in America it's only about 5 or 6% of calories come from unrefined plant food, and we have 90% of people dying of heart attacks, strokes, and cancer and diabetes, and as that percent from unrefined foods goes up, the percent of people dying of these foods, of these diseases of nutritional extravagance and nutritional stupidity goes down in direct proportion. As you go up to 50%, the 90% of people dying of these diseases goes down to 50%. As you go up to 80%, the percent goes down to 15 or 20%. As you go up to 90%, it starts, in other words, it goes a directly crossing curve. So here's a curve, for example, that shows plant foods versus heart disease around the world with 1970 statistics. And here's animal fat versus heart disease, of course. And the point here, of course, is that not just heart attacks are preventable, but 90% of our population over the age of 60 is taking medications for lowering their blood pressure for their cholesterol or diabetes. It's not just part of our population that develops heart disease and cancer. Everybody in America eating the American diet develops heart disease and cancer. Let me say that one more time. That when we do autopsy studies on people who die in car accidents in the ages of 40s and 50s, more than 98% of Americans have atherosclerosis. If you eat American food, you develop heart disease. If you eat American food, you eventually put on blood pressure medications. And if you eat American food, you develop cancer as well. So those people with heart disease have cancer. If there was a convention, an elderly male convention, right in this hotel this weekend, and they were walking by outside the door out front, and we hooked them in with a cane, and I anesthetized them against their will and laid them out on the table here. And took out their prostates and put it in the Vitamix and turned it on. And looked at those prostate cancer cells under the electron microscope, we'd find the prostate cancer cells in 80-90% of those men. Just like women in their breasts. Breast cancer has a 120-day doubling time. The time the cancer is large enough to be detected by a mammogram, it's already been there more than 12 or 15 years. Almost all women in America get breast cancer cells in their breasts because you can't escape from the biological laws of cause and effect because we're simply eating a cancer-causing diet that we have to stop. Now here's the thing, is that these diseases are not only preventable, but they're reversible. Even the dysplastic changes are reversible. Even the dysplastic changes in the breast that can lead to breast cancer are reversible. Even the methylation of the DNA that accumulates and eventually leads to cancer is reversible with superior nutrition. Even the obstructions in your heart that are when the doctor tells you that you need angioplasty or bypass surgery, those obstructions are reversible through excellent nutrition. And of course, many people know that angioplasty and bypass surgery, these billion-dollar procedures, are a scam. What I'm saying here is the foundation of cardiology, the foundation is malpractice, because they're looking at obstructions, not at vulnerable plaque, and they're treating obstructive areas of the heart that, when treated, do not lead to people living longer or have fewer heart attacks in their future. In the same time frame the person could have been evaluated, they could have been put on a heart disease reversal program nutritionally, and the person, by the time they the time they went through the bypass and then were rehabbed and went back to work again, in that same time frame, their disease could have been reversed and their chest pains could have been gone with excellent nutrition without costing any money, let alone spending $150,000, which didn't even get them better, which now gives them a permission slip to think they're okay, and they can just continue to eat the same diet that caused the problem to begin with until they eventually worsen and die prematurely. So in other words, the data exists today from epidemiologic studies, cohort studies, interventional studies, case studies, that heart disease is preventable and even reversible. And the information doctors use for their medical practice is biased information produced by drug companies that doesn't tell us the side effects and the true value of prescription medications. When you're put on blood pressure medications, because you inevitably will be if you eat American food, nobody tells you that when you take enough medication to lower your systolic blood pressure into the favorable range, it in most cases drives the diastolic blood pressure too low into an unfavorable range that increases your risk of atrial fibrillation and irregular heartbeats, then requiring you further medication to treat that, and then further medication to treat the other side effects of those drugs, and it creates a medical dependency that's just insane. So moving on. Excuse me?
It's what?
It's insane?
He said it's moving on.
I said, I have to wrap this up, so I gotta talk a little quicker. Okay, so metabolic syndrome is the constellation of factors, which means people are overweight, have high glucose levels, have high blood pressure, and have high cholesterol. These people are highly prone to early death, and people with just high blood pressure, the next slide is saying people with just high cholesterol, overweight, and high blood pressure have triple the average healthcare costs than people without those issues. And eating meat, of course, drives up metabolic syndrome, so it raises your blood glucose, raises your blood pressure, raises your cholesterol level, sets you up for higher levels of metabolic syndrome, which increases your medical costs by five times higher than people without these issues. We're talking about the consumption of processed foods, and especially of animal products, especially factory farmed animal products, dramatically increasing the costs of healthcare, destroying our economy, and laying a foundation for our recession that's going to make it very difficult to come out of unless we improve the health of Americans and reduce healthcare costs. And we can't reduce our healthcare costs by legislative changes in Washington. We have to reduce our healthcare costs by people changing the way they live and eat. We have this perfect dietary model, as John Mackey referred to, this diet high in meat and cheese, low in vegetables, fruit, beans, nuts, and seeds, high in refined carbohydrates. This model, designed by the Taliban, and given to America specifically to have people drop dead of cancer. And it's bad enough we have this diet, but then we actually give people foods that raise the hormones that cause prostate cancer, and especially breast cancer. So our country has fueled an explosion in breast cancer, and it's particularly important to focus on breast cancer, because breast cancer is a disease that's been affecting women at younger and younger ages, and the younger that they're affected, the more aggressive the cancer is. And also, prostate cancer in men is a more slowly growing cancer that generally kills men at a later age than breast cancer kills women. So breast cancer is a particularly important disease to focus on, and every woman in America must know these facts. They must know that taking folic acid and vitamin pills increase the risk of breast cancer, and taking prenatal vitamins with folic acid increases the risk of breast cancer. They have to know that. They have to know that drinking dairy products increases the risk of that recombinant bovine growth hormone given to dairy farms and to dairy cows increase the risk of hormones in the cows, and it puts more IGF-1 and other hormones into women that cause breast cancer. Every woman has to know that, and that the studies show, for example, when a recent study published this month, even in the Journal of Breast Cancer Research, showed that higher levels of IGF-1, estradiol, testosterone, prolactin, insulin increase risk of breast cancer. Let me say that again. That a higher level of any one of those hormones, any one of them, increases the risk of breast cancer more than 10%. When you mix together multiple hormones that are elevated simultaneously, you increase the risk of breast cancer more than 50%. Now, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which we get from eating animals that are raised in factory farms more, because they give animals these hormones to make them grow faster, especially 100 days prior to slaughter. But also, and of course, milk drinking, commercially raised milk has more IGF-1 and hormones and more estrogens and prolactins and hormones in it. But also, animal protein itself raises the levels of IGF-1 in human tissues. Let me say that one more time. Even wild animals, even animals raised in pastures, the IGF-1 in human tissues is raised by the biological value of that protein. The more high biological protein you consume, the higher level of circulating IGF-1. And circulating IGF-1 is very powerfully breast cancer promoting. So we're looking to advise women to eat a diet particularly lower in protein, but particularly lower in animal protein. Because the idea that this idea in America that we've elevated animal protein to some heightened state of nutritional value because it has a high biological value is the exact reason we should be avoiding it. So milk and hormones, meat and hormones, excess protein shortens lifespan, leads to dementia, increases risk dramatically of all cancers, especially breast cancer, and of course high protein intake is the key determinant of IGF-1 in humans. Almost all cancers are associated with higher consumption of animal products, especially animal protein, but some cancers are animal protein sensitive and some cancers are animal fat sensitive. So we have different cancers, but they're all associated with increased risk of higher consumption of animal products. Animal fat and cancer, of course, we see a good correlation between animal fat intake and overall cancer. And of course, we're saying here, and I'm saying, that a third arm of our immune system, the most important, a third arm of our immune system is green vegetables. Let me say that one more time. That our immune system does not function normally without the regular and high consumption of green vegetables in our diet. That we have underlying the epithelial lining of our digestive tracts are lymphatic tissues that are activated by the isothiocyanates, the ITCs from green vegetables. Without the raw materials, without those green vegetables raw materials, you don't have a functioning immune system. The Nrf2 mechanism, Nrf2 is a transcription protein that activates the ARE, the antioxidant response elements in cells, which controls free radical production in the cells, are not activated or functional without the regular consumption of green vegetables and green cruciferous vegetables. You are laying yourself defenseless against viral infections, against cancer, against bacterial infections from the overuse of antibiotics. You are exposing yourself to danger without the regular consumption of green vegetables in your diet, because our immune systems are dependent on the regular consumption of these foods. As a primate, we've developed in an environment that became dependent on the regular consumption of food for us to function normally. And food means real food produced by the natural world, not fake food produced by modern America today. Now here's just a study published in the medical journal Metabolism that showed that the American Heart Association's diet did not work at lowering cholesterol, but the Nutritarian diet that I'm recommending, and I coined that word Nutritarian to get people the idea that we want a diet that's higher in nutrients and designed for it to be disease protective. The word vegetarian is not sufficiently adequate because a vegetarian diet could be one made of mostly processed foods. It doesn't have to be healthy, where a Nutritarian diet, by definition, means rich in micronutrients. And of course, that study showed that the LDL cholesterol within 6 weeks' time dropped 33%, which was more powerfully lowering than cholesterol-lowering drugs. But when you lower your cholesterol with good nutrition, without drugs, then you lower your body weight, you lower your blood pressure, you increase the antioxidants in your tissue, you lower free radical formation, you prevent inflammation in the blood vessels, you reverse vulnerable plaque, you have much more effective protection than lowering cholesterol. So the cholesterol level is not an accurate predictor of cardiovascular risk. It's just a predictor of what a person's diet is. It's the dietary quality that better predicts your cardiovascular risk than just a cholesterol level. You could lower your cholesterol with a medication, and you can still be eating a bad diet, and that still won't be protective. Now raw vegetables in general are powerfully protective against cancer, and cancers of all types are protected by the eating of raw leafy green vegetables. So how many of you eat a salad every day, a big salad of raw vegetables every day? Because I want you to put a big sign in your refrigerator that says the salad is the main dish, and have at least once a day have a huge salad that you chew very well. It's the most important thing you can do for your health. And cruciferous vegetables powerfully lower the risk of cancer, especially prostate, breast, and colon cancer, the main cancers in America. And mushrooms protect powerfully against cancer. How many of you women know that medical studies show that a woman who eats mushrooms every day has a 64% lower risk of breast cancer? Now, shouldn't every woman in America know that? Shouldn't that be on the front page of People magazine or Time or Newsweek or something? Well, here's the thing. That same study showed that women who ate green vegetables or green tea plus mushrooms, and there's only 10 grams of mushrooms in the study, only one mushroom the size of your thumb. It wasn't a lot of mushrooms. It showed those women had an 89% decreased risk of breast cancer. 89% decreased risk compared to women who weren't eating green vegetables and mushrooms every day. You know, mushrooms have something called angiogenesis inhibitors. The word angiogenesis means the growth of blood vessels. It prevents the growth of red blood vessels from feeding tumors and allowing cancers to develop. But when you eat mushrooms and onions and green vegetables and berries and cinnamon and beans, when you eat these foods, they're rich in angiogenesis inhibitors. And these angiogenesis inhibitors prevent the growth of blood vessels from fueling your fat that fuels the growth of your waste fat and prevents you from getting overweight. It's not just calories in and calories out. High nutrient diets reduce your appetite, reduce food cravings, and interfere with the deposition of fat on the body. They keep you slim and they keep you healthy. Onions and cancer. The highest consumer of onions have between 50 and 88% reduction of all cancers. And the amount of green vegetables and onions and mushrooms in these studies aren't the amount I recommend, because I recommend more than that. But if onions give you 55 to 88% reduction in cancer, and mushrooms give you 50 to 80% reduction, and green vegetables give you 50 to 70% reduction, what happens to a person who eats mushrooms, onions, and green vegetables on a regular basis? Right? This is important information that should be at should be on the tips of your tongue, and should be in the awareness of everybody in America, because we graduate from elementary school, from high school, from professional school, medical schools, and the most important information people should have learned to protect the most important thing in their life is their health. They don't learn. Vegetables, of course, have plenty of protein, but now you have the protein packaged in a high micronutrient package with the micronutrients humans need for normal immune function, as opposed to having the protein packaged in a package with hormones and fats and saturated fats without the phytochemicals and antioxidants we need. And of course, the animal products promote hormones that are cancer unfavorable. Anyway, protein content of plant foods is relatively high, especially green vegetables, peas, beans, nuts, and seeds. When you eat these foods that have protective effects against cancer, they automatically give you adequate protein, and a person doesn't have to be worried about consuming animal products for protein content. The protein content of green vegetables, you can see there, is right up per calorie, is right up there between poultry and fish. And beans and vegetables are close to eggs and dairy. That plant foods are not deficient in protein. In fact, the proteins in plant foods have a little different biological nature and structure. And because of the way they're packaged and bound to the fibers, it makes them not raise the hormones that produce cancers and still adequately fuel muscle mass. And the green vegetables also have muscles perform more efficiently, have better endurance and better response to exercise. And when you exercise and eat green vegetables, and beans is your source of protein, then you do build muscle mass, but the IGF-1 production now is produced locally in the muscle tissue, lowering the level of systemic IGF-1 and lowering the level of exposure of the breast and the prostate to the hormones that promote cancer. Now, the Physicians' Health Study and the Nurses' Health Study and the Framingham Study in Boston followed people for many, many years, for more than 20 years, and they found the most dramatic association with any food and reduction of sudden cardiac death and heart disease was the consumption of nuts in the diet versus no nuts. When nuts and seeds become your major source of fat in your diet instead of meat and cheese, you show more than a 60% reduction in sudden cardiac death. Sudden cardiac death is not heart attacks. That's the irregular heartbeat that people are shocking you back into. What I'm saying here is that a diet without nuts and seeds in it is potentially dangerous because nuts and seeds, because those fats and those sterols, stanols, lignans, and fibers are so important for adequate health. So nuts and seeds have an anti-seizure effect, an anti-arrhythmic effect on the heart. They show in all the studies, the non-nut grower funded studies, the Adventist Health Study, the Nurses' Health Study, they all show a dramatic reduction in all-cause mortality and a dramatic increase in lifespan, and that was also showed in the Seventh-day Adventist study as well. So my nutritarian food pyramid, of course, I don't advocate the consumption of animal products. I advocate, it's up to you whether you want to eat animal products or not, but if you do eat them, then they should be held to very small percentages, because the scientific studies show that once a person starts to increase their animal product consumption by more than 5 to 8% of total calories, you start to see the hormones like IGF-1 go up in the body high enough to produce significant increased risk in cancer. So, of course, here's a nutritarian food pyramid which has vegetables at the base. All types of vegetables, right? All types of colorful vegetables should form the major source of your caloric intake. And then beans, fresh fruit, whole grains, nuts and seeds should form the major majority of your calories. Nutritarian as opposed to, right, a food pyramid that's a plate. It shouldn't be a plate because we have to shape it so people are encouraged to consume larger portions of foods that are healthier and smaller portions of foods that maybe aren't as healthy, right? And this, of course, is one of my patients, 6 months into the diet program. But let me show you some real patients, if I can have an extra couple of minutes here. One is, this woman had 3 heart attacks in a 2-year period. She couldn't leave her house because she couldn't walk because of chest pain. She was on 12 different medications. She was literally given up to die and sent home to die and almost put in hospice care, right? Now, this is 7 years later. I went to her son's wedding. She danced at the wedding. She's on no medication. She has no heart disease. She's not a cripple anymore. After suffering 3 heart attacks, she melted away all her heart disease and lost 105 pounds in 1 year. Ronnie lost 140 pounds. He actually lost 150 pounds in 1 year. He went through bypass surgery, which clogged up again in 4 years. Then he had angioplasty, and after the angioplasty, within 6 weeks, he had an iatrogenic restenosis, where it clogged up again, and he couldn't even walk a block. His blood pressure wouldn't come down on 4 different blood pressure medications. He was spending $600 a month on out-of-pocket medical care after his insurance was paying for the majority of it. In 1 year's time, of course, Ronnie, off all his medications, his blood pressure's 110, his cholesterol's 110, he's exercising, playing tennis, running, he's back to good health again. And he wants me to tell everybody, and I never met this guy. His name is Ronnie Valentine, he's from Texas. And almost on his deathbed, he Googled reverse heart disease naturally or something, nutritionally. He found my website at drfuhrman.com. He joined the member center. I helped him with advice to ask the doctor forums, and I talked to him up, and I spoke to him on the phone once or twice too. But mostly I just answered his questions in the forums there. And of course, there are thousands of people like this. Thousands of people who've, like Charlotte, who was in a wheelchair with diabetes after a stroke, who's no longer diabetic, who's no longer in a wheelchair, who's no longer with heart disease, who dropped 130 pounds and no longer has her diabetes. Emily, you look at her face, who lost 100 pounds in 1 year, who's no longer depressed and allergic and chronically sick. In other words, here's the point. The point is that excellent nutrition and superior nutrition is the most powerful therapeutic intervention for serious illnesses and diseases. It's the most powerful intervention for sick people. It's not only prevention. It's that we've evolved the medical care system based on a pharmaceutical model and surgical model, which is really sexy and modern, but it really doesn't work. The basics, the simplest things work the best. Here's Jody, who suffered with psoriatic arthritis for 30 years, and I've seen patients of mine on the National Renal Transplant List waiting for a new kidney get well, with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, and we're talking about autoimmune diseases are effectively treated and resolved through excellent nutrition. And here's a person who suffered for 30 years, and now she's in her 60s with no psoriatic arthritis anymore, on no medication, finally climbing mountains, playing tennis, and enjoying her life for the first time. So this is wrapping up the last two sides. Here's a quote from the World Health Organization, which says that households should select predominantly plant-based diets rich in a variety of vegetables and fruits, pulses and legumes, and minimally processed starchy staple foods. The world has to change, and every one of us has to do our part by taking care of our own health and in reaching out and helping. Once we do that, we become a role model to help other people in our community to do better with their lives. And the fountain of youth is a plant-based diet containing high micronutrient-containing foods, vegetables, beans, mushrooms, onions, seeds, fruits, and nuts. I help people memorize those most powerful anti-cancer foods with the word GOMBS, G-O-M-B-S, greens, onions, mushrooms, beans, berries, and seeds. GOMBS, G-O-M-B-S. Limit or eliminate unhealthy foods, including processed foods and animal products. And modern nutritional science, obviously, provides substantial evidence that food is the major determinant of health and healthcare costs. And it's really a necessity for the future of our world and our economic and emotional and physical well-being. All right, I'm going to be back on a panel for questions and answers later, and I'll talk a little bit about food addiction, about 5 minutes about food addiction as a precursor to the start of that panel.